Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Reference Recording. And today we're talking about Mendelssohn's greatest symphony, number 3, the Scottish Symphony. It used to be called the Scotch Symphony. That was before the invention of Scotch tape and I guess liquor? No, Scotch, the liquor, was around forever. But I remember the changeover, because I used to see early record covers, and they said, Mendelssohn, Scotch Symphony. And then all of a sudden, one day someone said to me, it's not the Scotch, it's the Scottish. I mean, Scottish people are no longer Scotch. They're Scottish, maybe because it was the association with the liquor that was, causing people to see the term as somehow pejorative. I don't know. But anyway, the Scottish Symphony became the Scotch Symphony. See, look, here. Here's the one in question. It's Peter Maag with the London Symphony on Decca. And in those days, in 1960, it was the Scotch Symphony. It was Scotch. It wasn't Scottish. But now it's Scottish. Maybe some of my friends over there can tell me how that happened. It's like Uranus all of a sudden became Uranus, because once Voyager flew through it, the flew past it, or whatever it was, the spectacle. I mean, no one ever talked about Uranus unless you were an astronomer. And then all the news people were calling it Uranus, and everyone said, oh no, your anus. No, it's got to be something else. Let's call it Uranus. But it's Uranus, and it's the Scotch Symphony. But, so anyway, it's the Scottish Symphony. And the reference recording is Peter Maag with the London Symphony Orchestra on Decca, in case you were wondering, coupled here with fabulous Hebrides or Fingal's Cave Overture as well. And it was called Mendelssohn in Scotland. And I have to confess, much as I am sometimes down on the British press and whatnot for their provincialism and xenophobia and other, enlightening qualities. They're right about this one, and they have a right to actually have a little extra weight in making the judgment, because Mendelssohn, first of all, he was in Scotland. Okay, they know about that. And second of all, he was the most popular British composer of the 19th century, much to the credit of the United Kingdom. And as a result of that, I think they get a few extra votes when they decide who the reference recording is supposed to be. But this is a very interesting one for a whole batch of reasons, for a passel of reasons. Mendelssohn is not exactly on the up right now as a composer, because we tend to value composers who are better at portraying hysteria in music. And Mendelssohn was a genius of Mozartian caliber, maybe a greater genius than Mozart. Who knows if you can even compare such things. A fascinating personality, brilliant human being, who has the reputation of sort of a Victorian kind of a Victorian dandy, but he wasn't like that at all. He really wasn't. His music expresses or displays that impeccable logic and the sort of the aesthetic of somebody who was so comfortable in manipulating music, who was so aware of what it was and what it could do and what he wanted, and that he gets trashed as being facile and slick and technical and somehow not emotionally meaningful at all, which is so wrong. That isn't true. In fact, he was such a perfectionist that he published very, very little in his lifetime compared to the amount of music that he wrote. He constantly revised and polished. He was always dissatisfied because he was always aware of Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, who the greats were, and whose steps he was following, even more than Brahms in that sense. He had that fundamental insecurity that really forced him to do what he thought was the very best he could do. And the Scottish Symphony is also underrated, because people say, it's programmatic, it's Scottish, it's this, it's that. Well, it's one of the most important symphonies written in the entire Romantic period. It's in cyclical form, first of all. It has a motto theme that gets transformed as it goes. It was the model for Schumann's symphonies and the Franck Symphony in D minor, the whole French school. It's really an astonishing feat of musical imagination. And of course, the musical imagination is placed in the service of expressive ends. And this symphony is wonderfully expressive. I mean, it's in a soulful minor key. It has that wonderful storm at the end of the second movement. The buoyant scherzo, which is placed second, by the way. It comes in second place, not third, which is unusual. A lovely, lovely slow movement, touching and full of just sort of an elegiac lyricism. It's just marvelous. And then the finale that everybody dumps on. They dump on because it does exactly what the finale of Tchaikovsky's Fifth does. It starts out with a return to the idea of the first movement. The motto theme is the second subject, by the way, of the finale. And then after it's Allegro Guerrerico or Guerrerio or whatever it's called, warlike. It's a march. And then it sort of stops, the march stops, and then there's a glowing, triumphant coda with a brilliant major key transformation of the motto theme that some people find so ineffective that Otto Klemperer used to chop it out of his performances once in a while. Actually, I mean, it's exactly what Tchaikovsky's Fifth did. Tchaikovsky learned a lot from Mendelssohn. So many composers did. And he doesn't get any credit for it. So I just wanted to point that out because this really is a major, major, major symphony, one of the great romantic symphonies. And Peter Maag, what an interesting character to actually bring it to fruition at the early, 1960, or its first reference recording. This was the first, and still it's the one. I mean, when this gets reissued, everyone goes, oh yeah, that's the reference recording. It's interesting because Peter Maag was not a famous conductor, and deliberately so. He specialized in Mozart and Mendelssohn and things like that. He did other things too, but he gave up his career as a conductor for many, many years to go off to Tibet and indulge in a spiritual reawakening or refreshment of his life. He felt that something was lacking in his life as a performing artist, and who can blame him, because it's a tough, tough life, as everybody knows. And so he gave it up. Then he came back, and he made a Beethoven cycle. He made a Mendelssohn cycle. I wouldn't say that they were better than this. He didn't get the greatest orchestras, but he didn't care. He made music on his own terms. Let's put it that way. And when the Peter Maag box came out, here it is, on Eloquence, Australian Eloquence, it is complete Decca, Deutsche Grammophon, and Westminster recordings. There's not a lot. There's only 20 discs, a lot of concerto accompaniments, and a couple of operas. So, and some strange operas, Pear's Leonora, Verdi's Louisa Miller. He was never going to become, a big, big name. And yet, with the wonderful British quality of always rooting for the underdog, the universe of recorded Mendelssohnia, based largely in Britain, has nominated or has acclaimed this recording as the reference edition. And it's excellent. It's absolutely excellent. The London Symphony plays beautifully for him. There's conviction behind every single second of the performance. The sound was quite good. And it's the one we all got when we wanted the Scottish Symphony. Now, there are other wonderful performances of the Scottish Symphony. Of course there are. Many of them, actually. And there were some very good ones floating around when this came out as well, by much more famous conductors. But I think that there was something about this one, the very not majorness of Maag's career counted in his favor, oddly. It really did. I mean, not just the British underdog thing, just the sort of mystique behind this, what for a lot of people was a one-shot wonder. I mean, they weren't interested in Peter Maag's other recordings, his Mozart recordings and other things from the same period. There was just this. And it seemed to appear like Zeus popping out of the head of Athena, fully formed. There was just this amazing Mendelssohn Scottish Symphony. It made the work special. It really did. I mean, everything about it, the mystique surrounding this, it made the Scottish Symphony special. And it is special. And it deserves to be seen as special and heard that way and savored as an unbelievably brilliant creative act. And I think this performance had those qualities for both its musical reasons and for some, biographical or historical or non-musical reasons. But it doesn't matter as long as it gets the job done. So this is it. The reference recording for Mendelssohn's Scottish Symphony, Peter Maag and the London Symphony on Decca. If you don't know it, go for it. You'll be glad that you did. Take care and keep on listening, friends.